She slid the envelope across the kitchen table at 5:50 in the morning and asked me to set up the payments. $9,800 in back taxes on wages I had never once been paid. 9 years. I worked nights in that house. The most I ever saw was $105 a month, handed to me in 20s, the way you tip somebody. Here's what she did not know. I would one day find out. For every one of those nights, the state was paying somebody $26 an hour for my hands, not me. I left that morning with a laundry basket, $71, and a spiral notebook. Today I read wage records for a living. I am licensed to stand between an ordinary person and the tax office and speak for them. And last winter, I finally sat down and read 9 years of my own. Every hour was in there. Every hour had a price on it. And the woman who set that price had signed her name to a page, swearing she had paid me all of it. My name is Tessa Byrne. I am 31 years old. If you have ever been the one they called when something needed doing and forgot when something got shared, stay with me, because the quietest paperwork in that house turned out to be the only thing in my life that ever told the truth about me. Welcome to Quiet Rooms, where we sit with the betrayals that never raised their voice. I need to tell you where this started, and I am only going to jump backward once. After that, we move forward, one direction, all the way to the end. Go back 9 years from that morning. At the kitchen table, I was 17. That was the year my mother opened the house. It was not a hospital, and it was not a nursing home. It was our actual house, the one I grew up in, with the brown carpet in the hall and the bathroom door that never latched right. My mother got a license from the state to care for 4 adults in it, people too frail to live alone and not sick enough for a hospital bed. The state pays for that. It pays by the hour, for every hour. Somebody qualified is awake and responsible for those 4 people. My mother is Charlene. I want you to hear how she sounded, because it matters more than anything she did. She never yelled. In 9 years, I heard her raise her voice twice, both times at a delivery driver. She talked to everybody, the way you talk to somebody in a waiting room, low and warm and a little tired, like the 2 of you were in this together. When she asked you for something, it never sounded like a request. It sounded like she was telling you a nice thing about yourself that you had not noticed yet. The first night we had residents, she stood in the hallway at 11 at night and said the sentence I would hear about 4,000 more times. We take care of our own, Tessa. Then she went to bed. I was 17. I was Benethin. I had a chemistry test in 9 hours, and 4 people I had known for one day were asleep behind 3 doors, and 2 of them could not get to the bathroom without a person holding their weight. There was a chair in that hallway, green vinyl, the kind they put in waiting rooms in 1980, with a split in the seam on the left side that caught the back of your leg if you sat down too fast. My father had dragged it up from the basement that afternoon because there was nowhere else in the hall to put a person. I slept in that chair for 9 years, not every night, straight through. That is not how it works. You sleep in pieces. You go down for 20 minutes, and then somebody calls out, and you go, and you come back, and you go down again for 18 minutes. And around 4 in the morning, you stop trying and just sit there with your eyes open, waiting for the light to come up over the neighbor's fence. The first week, I could not do the math on my own sleep, so I started writing it down. That is all the notebook was. At the beginning, a spiral notebook from the drugstore, 79 cents. And every morning before I went to school, I wrote the date and the hours, 11 p.m. to 6:40 a.m. Up at 12:20, up at 1:50, up at 3:10, and again at 3:30, then a number at the bottom. I was not building a case. I want to be honest about that, because later people assumed I was clever from the start, and I was not. I was 17 and exhausted, and I needed one place in the world where the night was written down as a real thing that happened. When you are that tired, the hours stop feeling like they occurred. The notebook was me telling myself, they occurred. That habit is the whole story. Hold on to it. Here is the part that took me 9 years to understand. Everything my mother built was legal, on paper, in every direction. But one, she had the license. She had the fire inspection. She had the binder with the care plans in plastic sleeves, updated in her small, neat handwriting, better than most agencies I have seen since. Whenever an inspector came, and they came, the house was ready. The floors were clean. The residents were fed and dressed and content, because they were. My mother was genuinely good at the work, and so was I, and nobody in that house was ever neglected for a single hour. The only thing that was not true was me. On the paperwork, I was an employee, a real one, hourly, reported to the government every year, in full. In the house, I was a daughter, and daughters do not invoice. Both of those things were written down. Only one of them had a number attached, and for 9 years, I did not know the number existed. Stay with me, because the next part is where I found out what I cost. Go forward 2 years. From that first night, I was 19. I had gotten into the nursing program at the community college, 40 minutes away, not a hard school to get into. It was still the largest thing that had ever happened to me. I filled out the aid application in the kitchen with my mother sitting across from me, and she helped, and she was warm about it, and she said she was proud of me, and I believed her because it was true. She was proud of me. People think you cannot both be proud of someone and be using them. You absolutely can. That is the entire trick. 6 weeks later, the letter came back. I did not qualify for need-based aid. Not reduced. Not partial. None. The reason was one line, and the line said, my reported income for the prior year was $24,000. I read it 4 times, standing at the mailbox. I remember thinking there had been a mix-up with somebody else's file, because I had $180 in a checking account, and no car. $24,000. That was my income, according to the government of the United States. On paper, I was a working adult with a full-time job. In the actual house, I had been paid $105 a month. In 20s, when my mother remembered, I brought the letter inside. And this is where I need you to hear her, because if you have ever tried to confront somebody who never fights back, you already know what happened next. She read it. She sat down. She put her hand flat on the table, and she looked genuinely sorry. And she said, oh, honey, that is the payroll. That is on me. I will call them Monday. She did not deny it. Denial gives you something to push against. She agreed with me so completely that there was nothing left to say. Then she said, you know, we take care of our own. And then gently, almost as an afterthought, she said the second sentence, the one that did the actual work. Tessa, if we fix it now, they will want the money back. And there is no money. Do you understand what that would do to us? Us. Oh, I was 19. I had never once thought of myself as separate from us. That was the first night I understood that us was a thing I was inside of, and also a thing that could be pointed at me. I did not go to nursing school. I did not take out loans because I could not get a loan either, for the same reason. On paper, I earned enough to pay for it myself. I want to be careful here, because this is the part people get wrong when they retell it. Nobody locked a door. Nobody took my keys. I could have walked out at 19 with a duffel bag and no plan and let 4 elderly people wake up to nobody. That was the cage. It was never me. They had. It was them. I went back to the green chair that night and I wrote down the hours. Because I always did. That is the first thing I want you to notice. And I promise you, it comes back. Underneath the worst year of my life, there is a girl in a hallway, writing down a number that nobody had asked her for. If you have ever done unpaid work for people who called it love, comment 1 word below. Counted. I read them. I know exactly who you are. Go forward. 2 more years. From that letter, I was 21. This next one is small. It is the smallest thing in this entire story. I am telling it anyway, because 5 years later, it became the single page that ended everything. And I need you to have heard it here first, in its ordinary size. It was the middle of February. There had been an ice storm 2 days before, and the walkway had that gray crust on it that looks dry and is not. One of our residents, I will call him the gentleman in the front room, because he deserves his privacy, and because his name would only be one more name for you to carry, had a standing appointment with a foot doctor. I was walking him from the door to the car with my arm under his, which is exactly how you are trained to do it, and my heel went out from under me on the second step. I did the thing you are supposed to do. I put him down first. You take the fall yourself and you put the person down first, and I did. And he was fine, and he was laughing about it before I got up. My right wrist was not fine. My father drove me to the emergency room at 7:20 that evening. A distal radius fracture, which is the wrist bone on the thumb side, which is the bone almost everybody breaks when they land on a hand. They set it and they casted it, and they gave me a sheet of paper with discharge instructions and a follow-up date. I was in that hospital from 7:40 that night until 6:10 the next morning, because the waiting room was full of people who had also fallen on the same ice. 9 hours and change, under a fluorescent light, in a molded plastic chair, with my arm in a sling, and my father asleep next to me with his coat over his chest. I was not in the house that night. Not for 1 minute of it. Write that down. Somewhere in your head. I did. Literally, in the notebook. The next morning, in left-handed handwriting. That looks like a child's. I wrote the date. I wrote air, no shift. I wrote a 0 at the bottom, where the hours go. A 0. The only 0. In 9 years of that notebook. 5 years later, a state investigator would put her finger on that exact date on a printout and ask me a question that took my mother's entire life apart. But we are not there yet. 6 weeks in the cast. I worked all of them. You can do most of the job one-handed if you plan the night right. And I planned the night right. And my mother told everyone at church how strong I was. Go forward. 3 years. I was 24. My brother is Adam. He is 2 years younger than me. I want to say something about him now, so that you can hold it the whole rest of the way, because it explains the ending better than anything I could say at the ending. Adam was not a monster. Adam was a person who had never in his life been asked a question he could not walk away from. He was good with people. He is still good with people. He sold cars for a while, and then boat trailers, and every one of those jobs ended with everyone still liking him. He came to the house on Sundays. He was genuinely sweet with the residents. He would sit with the gentleman in the front room and watch golf for 2 hours, and the man's whole week was better for it. And then he would go home. That was the difference between us. Adam visited. I lived in the hallway. That spring, my mother opened a second house, same license structure, 4 more residents. A rented ranch house 11 minutes away with a ramp already built on the side. And she put it in Adam's name. He was the licensed provider of record on the second house. He was 22 years old and had never given a person a shower in his life. I found out at the dinner they had to celebrate it. I found out at the dinner because I was not at the dinner. I was at the original house covering the night, which is what I did every night, and my mother texted me a photograph of the four of them at a restaurant with a small cake on the table. I looked at that photograph for a long time. Then I put my phone face down on my leg, and I sat in the green chair with my eyes open until the light came up over the neighbor's fence. The next morning she came home, and she was warm, and she was tired, and she said the thing, "We take care of our own." And she meant it. That is what I need you to sit with. She was not lying. She had built an entire second house to take care of her own. And I was standing in the kitchen, and it had genuinely not occurred to her that I was in the sentence. I asked her, once, plainly, without raising my voice, whether I could be on the license, too, whether my name could be on anything. She said, "Honey, you are the one who actually knows how to do it. That is worth more than a piece of paper. I want you to notice the shape of that. It is a compliment. It is also a refusal. In 9 years, I never once got one without the other. And if you have grown up in a house like that, you know that after a while you stop being able to tell them apart, and you start to think that being needed is the same as being kept. That was the year I stopped writing down anything but the numbers. No comments, no notes, just the date and the hours and a total. I could not tell you why at the time. I think part of me had figured out that the notebook was no longer a diary. It had become a record. And records do not editorialize. Stay with me. The mail is about to change everything. And it arrives so quietly you would miss it. Go forward 2 more years. 9 months before that morning, at the kitchen table, I was 26. A letter came from the tax office with my name on it. My mother got the mail. She got the mail every day. She brought it in a stack against her chest and sorted it standing at the counter. And when she got to mine, she held it up and said, "Oh, this looks like nothing," and set it aside. I asked what it was. She said it looked like a form thing about the payroll, and she would look at it. 3 weeks later, there was another one, thicker. I asked again. She said she was handling it. That is the entire beat. That is all that happened. A woman said she was handling it, twice, in a warm voice. While making coffee, I let it go both times, and I have spent 5 years trying to explain to myself why. And the honest answer is that I had been trained, not manipulated in some dramatic way. Trained. The way you train a dog not to go past a certain doorway, with nothing but repetition and tone. I had asked 100 questions in that house, and every single one had come back to me as a compliment with a refusal inside it. And eventually your mouth just stops opening. That is not weakness. That is a nervous system doing exactly what it learned. But something in me had already started moving, because I did one thing differently that fall. And it was the only genuinely clever thing I did in 9 years. I went to the post office, and I got a mailbox. $12 a month. I did not tell anybody. I did not use it for anything. I just wanted one address in the world where the mail came to me first. 6 weeks later, the third letter went there. I opened it in the parking lot of the post office in my car, with the engine running. The tax office wanted $9,800. There was a page in it that broke the number down by year, and I read the years going backward, like a set of stairs going down into the ground. $24,000 in reported wages. 24,000. 24. 23,600, all the way back to the year I turned 18. I sat in that car and I did the arithmetic on the back of the envelope. And I want to save you the trouble, because I have already done it and you should not have to. 9 years of reported wages. $216,000. That is what the government of the United States believed I had been paid to sleep in a green chair. What I had actually received was $105 a month for 9 years. $11,340 total for everything. 216,000 on the paper, 11,000 on the table. I did not cry in that parking lot. I want to be accurate about that, because there is exactly one time in this story that I cry, and it is not here. What I did was much stranger. I laughed once, out loud, alone in a car, in a way that scared me a little. Then I drove home and made breakfast for 4 people and worked that night, because that is who I was, and because the gentleman in the front room did not care whose name was on the payroll. Stay with me. 9 months later, she handed me that envelope at the kitchen table, and everything I am today started at 5:50 in the morning on a Sunday in March. Here is that morning, in order, the way I still have it. 4:50 a.m. The lady in the back bedroom needed the bathroom. I walked her there and I walked her back, and I changed the bottom sheet because we had not made it in time. And she apologized 11 times, and I told her 11 times that it was nothing, which was true. 5:20 a.m. I put the sheet in the washer and started the coffee, because my mother came down at 5:30 and she liked it made. 5:30 a.m. She came down, robe, hair already up, reading glasses on a chain. She said good morning and she asked how the night went, and she listened to the answer, which she always did. Whatever else is true, she always did. 5:40 a.m. She sat down at the table with the mail she had been holding since the day before. 5:50 a.m. She slid it across to me. It was already open. She had opened my mail, which she had been doing for 9 years, and which I had never once objected to, because in that house the concept of my mail was not really available. Final notice, $9,800, plus interest that had grown since I had sat in the post office parking lot with it 9 months earlier. And underneath it, in her small, neat handwriting on a yellow sticky note, one line: call them Monday and set up the smallest payment they will take. We will get it sorted. I looked at it for a while. Then I asked her one question. I did not raise my voice. I have replayed my own tone 1,000 times, and I know exactly how it came out, which was flat and a little curious, like I was asking about the weather in another state. I said, Mom, did I ever get paid $24,000? She did not hesitate, and she did not look away. That is the thing about her that I still cannot fully explain. She looked right at me, sad and warm and completely present, and she said, Tessa, everything in this house has always been yours, which is not an answer, which is, if you take it apart, a very beautiful way of saying no. And then she reached over and put her hand on my forearm, and she said it. We take care of our own. Take care of us back. 5:52 m. I said, okay. That is all, I said. Okay. If you were waiting for the scene where I finally tell her everything, it does not exist. It never happened. 9 years of it came out as one word with 2 syllables. And then I stood up and rinsed my cup and set it in the rack. 5:55 a.m. I went upstairs. I put my clothes in a plastic laundry basket because I did not own a suitcase, which is a detail I did not find embarrassing until years later. I took the shoebox with the notebooks in it, 9 of them by then, spiral, the drugstore kind. 79 cents. Rubber banded in threes. 6:10 a.m. The day person arrived, which she did every Sunday at 6:10, which is the only reason I could go. I need that on the record. I did not leave 4 people alone. I have never in my life left anybody alone. I waited for the relief, and then I left. 6:12. I stood in the hallway with the basket on my hip, and I looked at the green chair. The split in the seam on the left side had gotten longer, over 9 years. There was a piece of masking tape on it that I had put there myself when I was about 20, and the tape had gone yellow and hard. That is the last thing I saw in that house. A chair with tape on it. I had $71, a laundry basket, 9 notebooks, and no plan whatsoever. And I want to tell you the truth about how that felt, because the movies get it wrong. It did not feel like freedom. It felt like nothing. It felt like walking out of a movie theater in the afternoon. Freedom came much later, and when it came in the mail. Nobody came after me. That is worth saying. In the first 6 weeks, my mother called 4 times, and every message was about the schedule. I slept in my car for 9 nights. Then, a woman I had gone to high school with let me have her basement for $200 a month. And I took a job cleaning office buildings at night, because night was the only shift my body still recognized as real. And that is where I met her. Her name is Verna. She was 61. She had done that same route for 19 years. And she was the person who trained me on the floor machine, on the 3rd floor of an insurance building at 11 at night. Verna did not fix anything about my life. She never gave me advice. She never told me my family was terrible. And honestly, if she had, I think I would have defended them. Because that is what you do. What Verna did was notice. About 3 weeks in, we were on our break in the stairwell, and I had the notebook on my knee. A new one by then. The 10th. And I was writing down the hours, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. 3rd floor, 4th floor, the lobby glass. Nobody had asked me to. I was being paid properly now, on an actual time card, by an actual company. There was no reason on earth to keep a private handwritten record of my own hours. Verna looked at it for a second, and she said, "What is that?" And I heard myself say, out loud, for the first time in my life, "It is so somebody wrote it down." She did not say anything for a minute. She ate her sandwich. Then she said the sentence I have carried every single day since, and I am going to say it once, exactly the way she said it. And then I am going to leave it alone. Baby, whoever keeps the record decides what happened. So, keep yours. That is it. That is the whole thing she gave me. I did not understand what she had handed me for another 3 years. I thought she was being kind about a nervous habit. She was not being kind. She was telling me the mechanics of the world. If you have ever had somebody rewrite a thing you lived through, in a nicer voice than yours, with more confidence than you had, you already know what she meant. You have been on the losing end of that sentence your whole life. Here is where I compress 4 years, because the survival years are not the story, and I am not going to make you sit through them. I cleaned buildings at night for 14 months. I moved out of the basement into a studio over a tire shop, with a window that faced a wall. I got a used sedan with 140,000 miles on it. I ate a lot of eggs. And a thing happened that I have to explain, because it is the hinge of my entire life, and it happened in a strip mall. I went to get my taxes done, because I had a real job now, and I was terrified of the tax office, in a way that people who have never gotten a letter cannot understand. The woman who did them was maybe 50, and she had a card taped to the wall behind her that said she was an enrolled agent. which is a person licensed to stand between you and the tax office and speak on your behalf. Not a lawyer, not an accountant, a specialist in one specific thing. The government thinks you owe something, and this person argues it. I asked her how you become that. She said, you pass 3 exams. There is no degree. Anybody can sit for it. Anybody. I sat in my car in that strip mall for 20 minutes, with my hands on the wheel. Anybody. Not anybody with a nursing school acceptance and a financial aid letter. Not anybody with a family that let them go. Anybody. I studied for 19 months, at night, in a laundromat because the light was better, and my apartment had 1 bulb. I failed the second exam the first time. I took it again 11 weeks later and passed it by 4 points. I want to say something about those 19 months that is not inspirational. It was mostly boredom and stomach pain. Nobody was watching. When I passed the 3rd exam, I sat in the parking lot of the testing center, and I did not have one person to tell. And I drove home and went to sleep. That is what leaving actually looks like. It is not a montage with music. It is a woman with a highlighter in a laundromat at 11 at night, in a plastic chair, still writing her hours in a spiral notebook out of a habit she picked up at 17 in a hallway. 4.5 years after I walked out with that basket, I was working at a small firm 3 towns over. 41 clients of my own, most of them people who had gotten a letter and could not breathe. I was good at it. I was good at it for a specific reason. And the reason is ugly, and I am going to say it anyway. I was good at it because I already knew, from the inside, that a piece of paper can be perfectly accurate and completely false at the same time. And then one Tuesday in November, a client sat down across from me and said something that ended 9 years of not knowing. Stay with me. This is where it turns. She was in her 50s. She had spent 11 years caring for people in their homes, for a small outfit 2 counties over, and she had come in because she had gotten a letter saying she owed money on wages, and the number on the letter did not match anything she had ever been handed. I gave her the standard answer. I have given it 300 times since. I said, I spell. First, we get your wage and income transcript. That is just a printout from the tax office listing. Every wage form anybody ever filed with your name on it. It costs nothing. You are allowed to have it. It is a record about you, and you can ask for it any time. Going back 10 years, and I heard my own voice say it. 10 years. I had walked out of that house 4.5 years earlier, and I had never once, in all that time, asked what my own paperwork said. I had thought about it, the way you think about a sound, in the wall. Something is in there. Do not open it. I finished her appointment. I did her intake properly. I want to be extremely clear about one thing, because it matters for everything that follows, and because I have been asked about it under oath since. I did not use my job to look at my family. Not once. I never touched a system I was not entitled to. Every single document you are about to hear about, I requested as Tessa Byrne, private citizen, about Tessa Byrne, using forms that any person in this country can fill out at a kitchen table. That is not me being noble. That is me being careful. If I had cut one corner, they would still have their license today, and I would have deserved it. That night, I filed the request for my own transcripts. 9 years. Then, I waited 5 weeks. They came in a plain envelope, and I opened it standing up at the counter. And then I sat down because I could not do it standing up. I want to describe what a wage transcript actually looks like, because it is the most boring document in the world. And it took me apart. It is a list. 1 block per year. Employer name. employer, identification number, wages paid, federal tax withheld. That is it. No sentences, no opinions, just a machine reciting what somebody told it. 9 blocks, 9 years. And in every single one of them, the employer was my mother's house, and the wages were paid, and the number was there in the middle of the page like a fact. $24,000, 24,000, 23,600, 24,200, on and on, down the stairs, all the way to the year I turned 18. $216,000. Total, over 9 years, that the government believed had gone from that house into my hands. I had received 11,340. Hund. I called those pages the wage sheets, and I want you to hold that name, because there are 3 documents in this story, and I need you to be able to tell them apart. The wage sheets said I was paid. That was the first one. It only told me half of the crime, because here is what the wage sheets could not tell me. They could not tell me what my hours had been sold for. The state pays for that kind of care by the hour, and it pays into the house, and then the house is supposed to pay the person who did the work. The wage sheets showed the second half of that pipe. They did not show the first. So I asked for the first half. Every caregiver in that program has an identification number attached to them, their own number, tied to their own name, used on every claim submitted for every hour they worked. I had one. I had had one since I was 17, and had never thought about it once. And a person is allowed to ask the state for the claims submitted under their own number. It is a records request. There is a form. It took me 20 minutes, and a stamp. 7 weeks later, I got 140 pages. I called it the claim list. Here is what the claim list is. Every row is 1 shift. Date, Hawasham, start time, end time, hours, rate, chu, and desaispans quaint, amount, paid, signed and submitted by the provider of record, which was my mother, 9 years of my nights, itemized, in a font. I read it the way you read something you already know is going to hurt, which is fast the first time, and very slowly the second time. The rate was $26 an hour. The hours, across 9 years, added up to 22,400. I am not going to make you do this arithmetic. I did it twice, once by hand, and once on a machine, because I did not trust my hand. $582,400. That is what my nights were worth. That is what was paid out for them. Into that house, over 9 years. Let me put that number somewhere you can feel it, because, as a figure, it is just noise. In the town I grew up in, $582,000 buys the house I slept in, and the house 11 minutes away that they put in my brother's name, and it leaves enough over to send somebody to nursing school 4 times. 4 times, and I could not go once. Then I turned to page 61. I had not been looking for it. I want to be honest, because people assume I went in hunting, and I did not. I was reading it the way you read your own life. Straight through, in order. Page 61. Covered a February when I was 21, and there was a row on it for the night of the ice storm. Start time, 7 p.m. End time, 6 a.m. 11 hours. $26 an hour, $286. Submitted under my identification number. Certified as performed. I was in an emergency room that night from 7:40 in the evening until 6:10 the next morning. with my father asleep in the chair next to me, getting a cast put on my right wrist. I sat there with my thumb on that row for a long time. Because that changes what this is. Everything before that was a family taking from a daughter, and families do that. And the law has almost nothing to say about it. There is no statute against a mother who never pays her child. There is no form you file for 9 years of a hallway, but a claim submitted to a state program for hours. That a person did not work is not a family matter. That is one specific thing with one specific name. And it does not care whose birthday you share. I got up. I got my keys. I drove to the storage unit where I kept the shoebox, and I sat on the concrete floor under a light with a pull chain, and I went through 9 spiral notebooks, with my hands shaking, until I found February of the year I was 21. And there it was, in left-handed handwriting that looks like a child wrote it. The date. Hall. 2 words. Air. No shift, and a 0. The only 0. In 9 years. I sat on that floor in a storage unit and I cried. One time, for about 4 minutes, alone, with the door open and my car running outside. That is the only time in this entire story that I cry. It was not for the money, and it was not for the fraud. It was for a 21-year-old girl with a broken wrist who wrote a 0 in a notebook at 6 in the morning because she needed one place in the world where the truth about her night was written down. She had no idea she was going to save my life. If somebody has ever told you that keeping track was petty, that remembering the details meant you were bitter, that you were keeping score, that you should let it go, I want you to hear this next part very clearly, because it is the only advice I have. Keep the record. Keep it badly. Keep it in a notebook that costs 79 cents. You will not know for years what you are holding. If that landed somewhere, comment the word 0. I will know exactly what you mean. Now, the third document. And this one is the one that ended it. And it is the one my mother wrote herself. To run a house like that, you sign an agreement with the state. It is not a formality. It is a page with numbered paragraphs, and it is a public licensing record. And any member of the public can request a copy for a small fee. And I did. And it came in 9 days. I called it the promise page. Paragraph 14 said that the provider certifies that all persons providing care are compensated at no less than the rate stated in the application. Paragraph 17 said that the provider certifies that all records and claims submitted are true, accurate, and complete, and that the provider understands that submitting a false claim is a violation of state and federal law. Underneath that, a signature line, and on the signature line, in small neat handwriting, I have seen on 9 years of care plans in plastic sleeves, and on a yellow sticky note that said, "Call them Monday." My mother's name, she had signed it every year, 9 times. So here is what I had, and this is why nothing in this story is a coincidence, and why nothing in it depended on luck. I did not need a whistleblower. I did not need somebody to leave a microphone on. I did not need one single person to take my side. I had a page where she swore she paid me. I had 140 pages where she billed for me. And I had 1 row on page 61 where she billed for a night I spent in a hospital, which I could prove with a discharge record I requested from the hospital, as myself, about myself, for $11. Size. Her handwriting, her signature, her claims, her house. All I ever did was ask the government for copies of things about me. That is the part I still think about. Every weapon in this story was already in the building. She built all of it. She just never imagined that the girl in the hallway would one day learn how to read. I did not call her. I did not send a message. I did not drive over there and put 140 pages on the kitchen table, which I had imagined doing roughly 900 times. I filed. That is the whole revenge. I want to be honest about how unglamorous it is. First, I filed an identity theft affidavit with the tax office. That is the form a person files when somebody else has reported income in their name. It has a box for a narrative, and I wrote 4 sentences in it, because I have read hundreds of these and the ones that work are short. Second, I filed a report with the office at the state that investigates billing in that programs. Not an angry letter. A cover sheet. The claim list with page 61 marked. The hospital discharge record for the night of the ice storm. And the promise page with paragraph 17 underlined. Third, I mailed a copy of the whole package to myself. Sealed and did not open it. Old habit. Whoever keeps the record decides what happened. Then I went back to work, and for 11 weeks, nothing happened at all. That is the part nobody tells you about this kind of ending. It is not a door coming off its hinges. It is an envelope going into a slot, and then 11 weeks of your ordinary life, while in a building you have never been inside. Somebody you will never meet opens a file. The first thing that came back was a phone call from a woman at the state, and she asked me one question that I will hear for the rest of my life. She had the claim list in front of her. She had the hospital record next to it, and she said, "Miss Byrne, I want to make sure I have this right. On this date, the provider billed us for 11 hours of your care. Where were you?" And I said, "I was in the emergency room getting a cast." And she said, "Do you have anything from that time that is yours? Anything you wrote yourself?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am. I have a notebook." 3 days later, my mother called me for the first time in 4.5 years. She left a message. I still have it. It is 51 seconds long, and it is the warmest thing you have ever heard. She said there had been some confusion with the state, and it was probably a payroll thing, and she was sure it was all a mix-up, and it would be so much easier if the 2 of us could just sit down together. And she loved me, and she had always loved me. And would I come by the house? I did not go by the house. I met them at my office on a Thursday, at 4 p.m., after my last appointment, with the door open and a colleague still in the next room. My mother sat down. My brother Adam sat down beside her. My father waited in the car, which is the most honest thing my father has ever done. She started the way she always started. She said, "Honey, you look tired." And I did the thing I had been practicing in my car for 11 weeks, which is not a speech. I had 5 things to say, and I had numbered them, because numbers do not shake. I said, 1. I did not sue you. There is nothing to sue for. 9 years in that hallway is not a crime, and I have made my peace with that. I said, 2. I asked the tax office for a list of every wage form filed in my name. They sent me 9. I never received that money. I have told them so, on a form, with my signature on it. I said, 3. I asked the state for the claims, submitted under my caregiver. Number. They sent me 140 pages. On page 61, there are 11 hours billed for a night I spent in an emergency room. I have the discharge record. The state has both. At that, Adam said, "Tess, come on. 1 night. That is 1 night out of 9 years." And I looked at him, and I said the only unkind thing I said that entire afternoon. I said, "Adam, they are not investigating 1 night. They are investigating the person who thought that night was fine." Then, 4. You are the licensed provider of record. On the second house, your name, your signature. Since you were 22, I did not put it there, and I am not the reason anybody is going to ask you about it. His face changed. That was the first moment either of them understood that this was not a conversation with a daughter. And 5. I am not going to argue with either of you about what happened. I am not here to be convinced. I am telling you what I filed because you are going to hear about it from someone, and I would rather it was me. And then my mother did the thing she has always done, and I need you to hear it because it is the last time she ever said it to me. She reached across the desk and put her hand flat on the wood, not quite touching mine, and she said, softly, sadly, with her whole heart in it, "Tessa, we take care of our own." And I said, "I know. I have got 140 pages of exactly what you took. That is it. That is the confrontation." Nobody yelled. Nobody stood up fast. It took 9 minutes, and I walked them to the elevator, and I said, "Drive safe." And I meant it. Here is what happened after, in the order it happened, in plain language, because you have earned the plain language. 14 weeks later, the tax office issued a determination. That is a letter, 1 page, that says what the government has decided is true. It said that the wages reported in my name for those 9 years were not received by me, that they were removed from my record, and that the balance of $9,800 was canceled. It also said I was owed a refund of $4,216, because in 2 of those years, I had actually paid tax out of my own cleaning wages against income. I never got $4,216. That is what 9 years came to. In money, I never cashed the letter, obviously, but I did frame it. Not the check, the letter. It is on the wall of my office behind my desk where clients can see it. And when they ask, I tell them the truth, which is that it took me 5 years and $11 for a hospital record. 7 months after that, the state finished. The provider agreement was terminated. Both houses. My mother was permanently excluded from that program, which means she may never again be paid by the state to care for a person in a home, anywhere, for the rest of her life. The restitution order was $194,000. It does not go to me. It goes back to the program. I want to be clear about that, because people always ask. I did not get rich. I got a letter. The second house closed. In October, Adam was not charged with anything, because the investigators concluded what I already knew, which is that he had signed papers he had never read for a business. He had never run. He surrendered the license and he paid a fine. And he has to answer a question about it on every application he fills out for the rest of his life. And my mother, who had spent 30 years being the most competent person in any room, spent that winter on the phone with an appeals office that had already read paragraph 17. Then she escalated, the way they always do. 11 voicemails in 6 weeks. Not one of them contained an apology. I have listened to all of them, and I am telling you the count is 0. What they contained was worry. She was worried about me. She was worried about what this was doing to me. She said she did not recognize who I had become, which, I will admit, made me laugh because neither did she. That was the entire problem for 26 years. My father came to my office once, in March, and stood in the parking lot and did not come in. I watched him from the window for 4 minutes. Then he got back in the car and drove away, and I sat down and did my 4 o'clock appointment. Adam sent long emails. He is a good writer. My brother. The emails were about how none of us had had a choice, and how Mom had done her best, and how the family was destroyed now, and how he hoped I was happy. I answered him one time, with 1 line, and it is the coldest thing I have ever written, and I do not regret it. I wrote, You had a choice every Sunday for 9 years. You just never had to make it in the hallway. He did not write back. Here is the ending, and it is smaller than you want it to be. I am sorry. It was smaller than I wanted it to be too. There was no reunion. There has not been one, and I do not expect one. My mother is 63, and she will go to her grave believing that she was a woman who took care of her own, and that her daughter reported her to the government over a misunderstanding about payroll. And no page of any document is ever going to change that, because she has been holding that story together with both hands for 30 years, and she cannot let go of one corner without the whole house coming down. I did not get my family back. I got my name back, which turns out to be a different thing, and, on most days, a better one. But I got one thread, and I want to give it to you, because you have sat with me this long. Adam has a daughter. Her name is Nell. She was 11 the year I left, and there is one thing about her I never told anybody. One night, when she was staying over, around 3 in the morning, she came out of the spare room and found me in the hallway. She did not ask why I was sitting in a chair at 3 in the morning. She went to the kitchen and came back with a glass of water and put it on the floor next to the chair and went back to bed. That is all. A kid put a glass of water on the floor. She is 16 now. Last spring, she wrote me a letter, an actual paper letter, which nobody her age does, and asked if she could come see me sometime. There was a line in it, near the end, and it is the only part I am going to read to you. She wrote, "I remembered you sitting in that chair my whole life, and I never knew what it was. Nobody ever explained it. I have started writing stuff down, so that later I will know what it was. She comes every other month now. We do not talk about her grandmother much. We go get pancakes. And that is the vindication, not a courtroom. A 16-year-old with a notebook who figured out on her own that the record belongs to whoever keeps it. One last thing. I have a chair in my office. I bought it used for $40 from a place that liquidates medical offices, and it is green vinyl. And it is almost exactly the chair from that hallway. And yes, I know how that sounds. And no, I do not care. It is where my clients sit. They come in holding a letter and they cannot breathe. And I put them in that chair. And I say the sentence, I say 400 times a year. First, we get your transcript. It costs nothing. You are allowed to have it. For 9 years, I thought that chair was where I got used up. It is not. It is where I learned that being awake at 3 in the morning with somebody else's paperwork is a skill, and that some people have to buy that skill, and I got it for free, on the worst terms anybody has ever gotten it, and it is still mine. And the notebooks are in a fire safe now, all 10 of them, rubber banded in 3s. For 9 years, I thought I was writing down what I was owed. I was not. I was writing down that I was there. My mother told me 4,000 times, in a voice like a hand on your arm, that we take care of our own. She was right. She just never once got around to asking who mine was. It turned out to be a girl in a green chair at 17, with a 79-cent notebook, writing the hours down for somebody. She did not know who. It was me. It was always going to be me. If you are the one in the hallway right now, the one everybody counts on and nobody counts, do me one favor tonight. Write it down, just the date and the hours. You will not know for years what you are holding. And if you want to sit with more stories like this one, stay with us. There is a whole room of us in here, and none of us are keeping score. We are just keeping the record.